Hello and welcome back to Karma Stories. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have some stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. Before we start today, I just want to thank each and every one of you for being here. You guys make this absolutely worthwhile with all of your comments, your likes, and subscribing to my channel on YouTube, also over on the podcast. So thank you again to each and every one of you for everything you do. I love you all. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from DareAffectionate7725. Wait for feedback, ongoing. Hi all, thought I'd post this here while I'm being maliciously compliant at my current job. I've been with the company, 10,000 plus employees, for 4 years, and switched departments last year due to relocation to another country, and changed my contract to be fully remote. I really enjoyed the company and position, as well as daily tasks, and was challenged in many ways and learned a fair bit. But it wasn't a position with contractual remote possibility, so I decided to change departments and to a fully remote position. The new team was very small, with just 4 people including the manager. When I joined the team, I started by organizing their chaos into a workable structure and roadmap strategy on how we can achieve the completion of the open tasks and requests. My manager at that time was useless, but we got along fine, and he let me do my thing. However, there are certain types of requests and changes where I do not have the authority to approve, and it needs to go through my manager to the higher-ups for approval. In all that time, all the requests that I forwarded for approval or just feedback were still open and waiting. No matter how many one-on-one or team meetings we had, they are being pushed further out pending approval. For the first few months, I had already completed all assigned tasks where possible and helped out in other teams where I could. This particular manager was promoted after 3 months of me joining and hired his replacement. The new manager joined us 3 months later and reported to my old manager. At this point, I mainly worked with other teams and helping them. All my tasks are waiting approval and no new tasks were given. I am somewhat relaxed with new people during the onboarding process and make sure they have time to digest it all properly and understand the background. So again, 3 months later, and having learned what type my new manager is, I gave up on explaining the complex environment and what is required to be able to deliver results for me or us as a team. At this point, I've worked in that team for 9 months, onboarded my new manager, and completed everything I could complete, and helped my colleagues getting on with their open work. Naturally, other teams didn't always need my help, so I was a bit idle for most of my manager's onboarding time. Over and over again have I stated to my new manager that I have nothing to do unless open tasks are given approval or new ones are assigned to me, and I asked to please escalate if any of it really needs to be done. 2 months ago, my new manager exploded on me during a meeting to stop asking for approval on the open tasks and wait for feedback. I specifically sent a follow-up email to get that in writing and promptly received a response back to wait for feedback or new tasks. Well, that's what I do now. I wait and do nothing besides the weekly team meeting where I have no updates. I also no longer help out in other teams because of what my manager said. If the teams really needed my help, they have to go through my new manager, and any request received was rejected. And I will keep waiting until hopefully it will explode. OP added a couple of edits down at the bottom. The first one says, "My manager's boss knows all of this from his own time managing the team. I have spoken to the big bosses, CEO and CTO about it, and followed up twice with an email including everything that is still open, including items he needs to approve himself. So I think they're very well aware of the situation. It just doesn't have priority right now. All evidence is saved in an accessible team space, and I have a personal copy. Both I keep updated when something comes up. Fallout. One team member resigned last month, and the other one is already looking for a new job. Important to know, there is a 20-year age gap between me and the other 2 members of the team. They still need and want more experience. Our new manager is early 60s and should retire soonish. We had an impromptu team meeting yesterday without the manager where we basically all laughed about this situation. But we're sad at the same time that we could not use our skills. Personally, I decided to ride this wave and see where it goes, because, let's be honest, who doesn't enjoy being paid without having to work? Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Darth Kiwi Chris. It says, "Just a small suggestion, back up that approval list. Or if you want to be meta petty, Print out each request and make a wall of them. OP responded and said, I made a folder in our team space with all of the evidence of me chasing work, including all the follow-ups I made in writing and my last feedback meeting, which technically HR should be interested in, but they are not, which states all of this in writing. There is a backup of all of this on my personal device, and if anything new pops up, I will add it. Thanks for the suggestion. I am kinda hoping for a payout package, seeing as they don't really need me. Another commenter down below called Great Extension said, might as well get a second job. OP replied and said, I made already a list with options, but what is holding me back are higher taxes and a required approval from my company as per policies that I would take on a second job in a non-competitive field. Maybe I could do more research on how other people deal with extra income and the taxes in such a situation. This one is kind of like that forgotten employee American Dream story that I did a couple years back now, where the guy would just sit there and do nothing all day long because they completely forgot about him. OP seems to be like in the same situation, only they're just waiting for new tasks and everybody higher up still knows they're there. Alright, OP updated this one, let's jump into that one now. This one is titled, Update, Still Compliant, Still Waiting for Feedback. It's been nearly a year since I shared my previous post about my experience following instructions a little too precisely and thought I'd write an update on how things are. Since then, not much has changed, which is in itself the story. Very little work has been completed over the past year. We continue to have our weekly meetings, though they rarely produced any concrete feedback or approvals. No further tasks were pursued beyond what was written in my job description. I stayed the course, remained meticulously compliant, and waited for guidance. No more proactive ideas, no creative concepts, and barely any initiative beyond the occasional clarifying question, which, of course, was promptly redirected to my manager and left in limbo. My last remaining colleague adopted a similar approach, albeit with a bit less subtlety. Eventually, he was let go. After his departure, I was handed some of his tasks, but my approach remained the same. Any ambiguity was returned to sender, and any progress was delayed until proper feedback arrived, which more often than not, never did. A few months later, a new hire joined the team. I observed his onboarding from a safe distance. To say it was chaotic would be generous. There was no structure, no documentation, and very little support. Watching him navigate that mess reminded me just how deeply the dysfunction had taken root. At some point, the process became even more rigid. Any emails to upper management now required prior approval. Even basic updates were subject to scrutiny, which further slowed communication and progress. And now, today, comes the inevitable next chapter. Management has decided to restructure the department again. My manager was dismissed. No replacement has been named, and no direction has been given. Just myself and the new colleague remain, both unsure of what happens next. For now, I suppose I will continue to do what I know best. Wait for feedback. Fallout. At this point, it is unclear what the future holds. With no leadership in place, no updated responsibilities, and no clear communication from above, both of us are in a holding pattern. We have not been given new objectives, nor have we been told what to expect. There is a quiet irony in all of this. The culture of waiting for feedback, of needing permission for every small step, has now left the department entirely unable to move. Leadership created a bottleneck, then removed the only person who was technically holding the valve. So here we are, 2 employees, minimal instructions, and absolutely no feedback. Business as usual. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user whose name I absolutely can't pronounce, but I will spell it out for you, and maybe you can try and pronounce it yourself. GHHQDM5A4UYSNUFM. It says, oh, I understand now. Leadership is probably talking about cutting the entire department or selling it off. So they don't approve any work because they don't want to commit to new stuff. It sounds like it will remain in limbo until the axe finally falls. Another commenter down below called Harry Smutter said, yikes, I highly suggest jumping ship as soon as possible. All you're doing is stagnating your own growth while waiting to be cut. You're setting yourself up for failure, especially for when you need to apply and interview. I don't know, I feel like OP has a bit of an opportunity in this case if they wanted to try and take it. Now there is nobody directly above them. The manager that told them, don't talk to upper management, is actually gone. So now OP can go directly to upper management, right? They should talk to that upper management, maybe get themselves promoted into that manager's position, approve all of their old work, and get things moving in that department again. But that's just a suggestion, probably something that won't happen, and because of how mismanaged this company is, OP might be better off going somewhere else. This story comes to us from Pro Friendzoner. Supervisor told me sarcastically to call the fire department. I did. Worked in retail in between jobs way back when, early 90s. Yeah, I'm old, get off my lawn. It was December, major department store that is no longer around. I know that doesn't narrow it down, sorry. Anyway, they tried to cram as much product on the floor as possible, to the point that you couldn't walk through the aisles and had to twist and turn to get past the fixtures set up with product. I casually mentioned to a supervisor that if the fire department ever came in, they would close us down for the hazards and lack of egress. She was highly stressed and blurted out to me, "You know what? Then call the fire department." I held my hands up and said, "Easy." She assigned me my duties and that was that. Well, she did tell me to call. On the way home, I stopped by a government building that had all sorts of agencies in it, told the receptionist my plight, and she pointed to a phone on the wall. Tell the operator I want the fire department, and they would patch me through to the station's non-emergency line. The fire chief himself answered. I told him how crowded it was and what the supervisor said. He had a good laugh and said they'd check it out. I was off the next day, but heard about it when I got back. Fire chief and a station house full of firefighters show up to do an inspection. He tells the store manager that egress is being blocked and he'd have to remove a lot of the fixtures in the aisles. Store manager says he has orders from corporate, fixtures stay. Fire chief assures him he will win the argument. Store manager stands his ground. Fire chief says, "All right boys, close them down." They evacuated the store, all 3 levels, and closed all entrances in December, prime Christmas shopping season. Although it wasn't a weekend day, it was during the week, but still. Store manager tried to protest and suddenly the sheriff's department starts showing up. Long story short, they were closed for 5.5 hours while the chief, store manager, and employees rearranged the store to acceptable levels. The supervisor never treated me differently, so I'm guessing she didn't remember the conversation. The store manager, surprisingly, did not get fired by corporate, but corporate was not happy. About a week later, I'm working with the store manager and supervisor when she asked why we can't do something a certain way. The store manager replied, "The fire department won't allow that," and that was it. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Chris14020. It says, "Imagine being naive or dumb enough to argue with a fire department official operating in an official capacity. You weren't going to win when it was strictly business. Making it personal is going to go even worse for you." I was surprised in this one that there was no fallout for OP at all, and that the person that told them to call the fire department completely forgot that they had told them that, even when the fire department showed up. We all need to remember that the fire department's one responsibility is to make sure people stay alive. You are absolutely not going to win an argument with them. If they want to shut you down, you will be shut down, but they're doing it because they want to save lives. This story comes to us from Hastings1033. Okay then, I won't help. I'm sure lots of people have stories like this, and here's mine. I'm retired now after a long IT career. Like most such folks, I worked as a software developer for part of this time earlier in my career. For a time, I worked for an engineering firm that produced a lot of architectural drawings and blueprints as part of the design process. I was the dev lead and primary designer for a new system to track drawings as they moved through the development and review process. To get to the point, the new system was launched to mostly good success and heavy usage. As with all new systems, people had a learning curve. As it was not a huge company, most of the user community knew me. We also had a help desk whose job theoretically included providing user support for this new tracking system. However, the company had ignored my repeated requests to let them spend meaningful time with me to learn the system well. The user community quickly realized the help desk was useless, so they would call me directly. I was fine with this. I always found helping the user community my favorite part of my job. Word came down to me that I was to direct all such calls to the help desk. Frankly, I ignored this at first, but after a while, it was made clear I could not. So I complied. That did not go well for the users. They basically got no help. Took only about 3 days for word to come back that I could help people again, and time was set aside for me to properly train the help desk folks. Okay, this was just a quick one, but holy crap, if you have something new rolling out and you have a help desk that is supposed to support it, how can they support it if they haven't been trained in it? This company sounds like an absolute crap show. You could even go so far as to think that management would look at the call volume going into the help desk, see that it dropped down significantly, and they'd be like, oh, well, then the new program must be just working fine, because people aren't calling into the help desk, right? Our last story today comes to us from Wake Me Up 3000. Scheduled breaks must be taken on schedule. My work has very little interaction with others for the most part. Basically, you come in, do your work, and go home, except for a meeting or two during the day. Pretty straightforward. New manager comes in and wants everyone's schedule so she can keep track of the comings and goings. Your breaks and lunch need to be scheduled the same every single day and taken on time, according to her memo. My morning break is at the end of the team's 15-minute huddle. A few days later, the huddle is running long, so I got up and left the room after 15 minutes. She must have thought I was using the restroom, but I was sitting in the break room, which she noticed when she walked through at the end of the huddle. Every single time the huddle ran long, I'd leave after 15 minutes. She finally asked about it, and I replied that my break was scheduled and needed to be taken on time. She said, that means within reason, and not to walk out of meetings. I asked if she was going to amend her memo. She didn't amend her memo. I didn't change my routine. This continued like a pissing contest for the 6 months she ran the department until she transferred. Next manager turned huddles into team meeting bullet points for the day, and we all went back to normal. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Lloyd Penfold. It says, I have said before, and I will doubtless say again many times, working to rule is the best form of industrial action. They can't discipline you for it. You have to think in this case that if OP waited until the meeting was over and then took their break, they would probably get in trouble for not taking it on schedule. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation. Tell me what you would have done in this situation. When it was time for your break, would you just walk right out of the meeting and take that break? Or would you wait until the meeting was over and then take your break at that point? I'm pretty sure I would be of the wait and take my break, but because when I was actually in the working world, I didn't stand up for myself, and I know a lot of people don't, unfortunately. Alright, we're gonna go ahead and end this one here. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us on your preferred podcasting platform. If you're on Spotify, remember you can rotate your phone and watch the same video there that we put up on YouTube. I thank you all for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.